Should you get a knife or gloves first in CSGO? It's a question I've been asked a few times, so I thought I'd offer my opinion on the subject. I'll be going over a few points for either side, including price, looks, and features, and then I'll let you know at the end which one I think is the best choice. But before we get into that, I want to thank you guys for the support on the channel recently and welcome any of you who are new. If you do end up enjoying today's video, please consider subscribing to the channel, and with that out of the way, let's jump into it. So let's start with some unique features about gloves or knives that would make either more desirable. For gloves, they are of course visible at all times. This means you can pick up a nice pair of gloves to go with the rest of your inventory, and you don't have to worry about spending a lot of money on something you don't see that often. On the other hand, knives have this crazy thing called animations. Pull out animations, inspect animations, alternate inspect animations, attack animations, you get the point. Gloves don't feature any of these, so in terms of cool things you can do with them, knives definitely win here. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is patterns. Patterns can make some not so good looking knives quite cool, depending on what pattern you get. This largely affects the more expensive knives though, such as the blue gem case hardens and the marble fade patterns. As this video is what to get first, I'm guessing most of the good pattern-based skins are out of the budget here. But this goes for gloves as well. The only gloves that have any real pattern-based options are expensive ones, such as the crimson kimonos, so I'm not giving this one to either side, because at this budget, it's not particularly relevant. So the next thing we'll be covering is looks. Now, I know this is subjective, but this is just my opinion, and it's one that I figure a fair few of you will agree with. And what is that opinion? Default gloves with a cheap knife can look quite cool, but the default knife with cheap gloves, however, doesn't look great. There are definitely a fair few more cheap knife styles to choose from, so you have a lot easier of time picking one that you like. And also with your knife, you get to show people that you have a different knife in the kill feed, which isn't something you can say about gloves. So, when it comes to looks, especially at this budget, I have to give it to the knives. And the last point here, and arguably most important, is price. Now, at the absolute budget option, gloves can start as cheap as around £40 for a pair of battle-scarred racing green driver gloves. There are also a few other gloves around this £40 to £50 price in their lowest wear rating, so there is a little bit of choice. Knives on the other hand start at around £75 for the cheapest Navajar patterns like the Forest Didipat or Safari Mesh, again in battle scarred. That being said, I'd argue for any decent looking pair of gloves, you'll want to get something in at least field tested or more likely minimal wear. Knives on the other hand can look not too bad in some very high floats. Patterns that don't scratch, like the stained or Damascus steel patterns, can look fine in very high floats, so serve as very good value options should you have quite a tight budget. So for that reason, despite knives being overall more expensive, I'm going to have to say they win on value. So with all of that considered, what should you get first? I'd have to say a knife. They're such an iconic part of CSGO that I think it's definitely the right option here. Of course, if your budget extends that far, I'd always recommend a nice cheap glove and knife combo over just a more expensive knife. For a little trick to get some decent looking gloves without buying any, some agents do have different coloured gloves on the CT side, and some have the long fingers as opposed to the short fingers on the T side. They don't look amazing, but it is something different. But before you do that, make sure you've got yourself some basic weapon skins, because they'll be visible most of the time. For some good options at the budget end, check out the video on screen with my 15 favourite budget skins in CSGO. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.